Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. My next guest is one of America's most influential voices on cultural, political, and educational issues. He served as the Secretary of Education under Ronald Reagan and as Director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy under George H.W. Bush. He's, of course, been a radio host, written 25 books, and joining us to talk about his latest, Tried by Fire, the story of Christianity's first 1,000 years. Would you welcome Bill Bennett? Bill.
Hey, Raymond.
Thanks for coming in.
Good to see you.
You know, we've been reading this book, members of my family, my kids have been reading it. Why did you decide, first of all, to call it Tried by Fire? Obviously, part of a Bible quote, and an important one from Peter.
Right, because they were. Because they were. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, Tertullian says. And a friend recommended to me that I do this book, Joel Miller, my editor at Thomas Nelson. And I thought about it. I said, well, that's a little far afield for me. And then I thought, the first thing I thought, Raymond, was back to those first religious books, those first catechisms, those first picture books.
Yeah.
St. Stephen, St. Sebastian, you know, the arrows.
The arrows and the rocks.
The stones and the arrows, right. How dramatic they were. Yeah. And I realized what an impression they made on me as a child. And here was an opportunity for me to learn more. I don't write books unless I can learn more. I don't think of my books as me dispensing my wisdom to the world, but me digging in and studying. So I've read, I don't know how many books, scholars' books, real scholars' books, to make a book that's accessible to the general public.
Well, I love this in that it's a history of Christianity, but with a particular slant. This is not the flyover. This is the blood and guts and the high stakes and cost of this belief moving through history. Why focus on that?
Well, it's two things, I think. It's interesting that I was waiting to hear what you'd say the book's about. It is blood and guts and gore, but it's also doctrine. Those are the two things
belief,
that interest me.
and spirit, that motive drives them to this sacrifice.
And I listen to your show and I hear your discussions about the Pope and doctrine and so on. These people took doctrine very, very seriously. They killed you if you were on the wrong side of doctrine. I mean, the Arian controversy, the Arian heresy, presided over by Constantine the Emperor. It's an extraordinary event. But yes, there's a lot of blood and guts. Because, again, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, and because the most extraordinary thing, and I think the single most important lesson, and it's a lesson Solzhenitsyn taught us recently, is that you can't destroy Christianity with oppression and suffering and persecution. The harder you press down, the stronger the faith becomes. The church and Christianity gets in trouble when it prospers, when it becomes of the world, when it becomes too familiar with the doctrines of the world, when it seeks to be contemporary, when it seeks to be relevant. That's when it gets in trouble.
What is the lesson for us today? We are seeing an explosion of Christian persecution, certainly in the last century, but contemporaneously, right now. What's the lesson here from these first, second, third century martyrs that can be applied? What light can we glean to understand what's happening today?
I don't know exactly, except I will tell you, Raymond, and I think this is an answer, that as I was writing this book, and you know I have to stay up on the news, that's my business, I would be watching TV and seeing those ISIS guys walking down the beach with their hoods, with a Christian next to each one and a knife, ready to cut a Christian's head off, behead a Christian. And I thought, it may be worse now than it's ever been. If you look at the numbers, it may actually be worse now than it ever was. There were mass persecutions. Nero, we understand that Rome was illuminated by the burning bodies of Christians. Diocletian probably may be the worst. But it may be worse today in actual numbers. And one thing that's different today that we've learned from my friend Nina Shea, our friend Nina Shea, is that there are sects, Christian sects and other religious sects, that are being eliminated forever. I don't know of any that I talk about in this book that are eliminated forever. Maybe thousands are persecuted and killed, but the sect is carried on. But now, these guys, these people whom have no right to be on this earth, these ISIS people, are doing what they can to exterminate a faith, a following, a set of practices.
You also spend a good deal of time in this book talking about Aquinas and Augustine and Jerome, the church fathers. Why spend so much time on them? What do they represent to you, and why did you feel it important to include them in this?
Is it terrible to say that as a young man I felt like Augustine? Lord, give me chastity, but not yet.
Have we all felt like Augustine once or twice?
Have we all been there?
Yeah.
He is the gigantic figure, the giant figure of the book, I think. And I tell audiences, I tell young people, remember the first time I said this, I got a titter. This was about 10 years ago. I said his mother, Monica.
Right.
And of course, you say the word Monica to a contemporary audience, and there's only one Monica they think of. I said,
well, I know a few.
No, okay, but this is Augustine's mother.
Yeah.
And our friend, is it still Archbishop Chaput?
Yes.
Yes. She'll soon to be cardinal, I hope.
Yeah, we'll see.
I hope,
Yeah.
I'm betting. I remember he said, Bill, in education, you talk about the helicopter parent, the hovering mother. She was the original hovering mother. She worried Augustine into sainthood. Isn't that a wonderful phrase?
Great.
Her tears were his baptism. She followed him everywhere, and he becomes, when he finally turns and accepts his faith, accepts Christ, becomes this gigantic figure, both in terms of his teaching and his writing, and the man to go to settle these major theological debates. Like do the sacraments take effect by virtue of the ritual rightly performed, or do they depend upon the worthiness of the minister? Ex opere operato, ex opere operantis. I'm just showing off. I'm going back to
He's spectacular.
this old stuff, which I knew a little about, and now I know a little more about.
No, and you preserve all of that. And that I also should tell people, what I love about it is, so many historical books, you get lost because of the sweep of it. This is broken into scenes. It's scenes that take you right in the middle of the action and give you all you need to know about these characters, and then you're on to the next movement. It really it moves along, and it's not a big commitment, even though it looks like a big book. It's not.
It's not big. It's 450 pages, but it is. I think it's better than the Game of Thrones. I think it's better than some of these TV things, and it's true.
Yeah.
And it takes us to a better place.
I want to share with you a poll. A recent Lifeway poll indicates that 63% of respondents agree or strongly agree that Christians face growing persecution in the United States. 60% say religious liberty in the U.S. is on the decline. Both numbers are up substantially since 2013. Why? Why do you think that is?
Well, it is the secularization of our culture. It is the change, the cultural shift that we have seen in the last 50 or 60 years. You could point to many things. I usually point to the media and to the family. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Democrat senator from New York, the man who introduced me 3 times before the Senate, said that the single most important change he saw over his tenure, which was long, was the decline of the family all over the West. This has changed an awful lot of things. And with it have come a whole set of justifications, arguing, many times quite strained, that the way we used to do things is wrong. It's always wrong. Now, some of the ways we used to do things are wrong, but many of the ways we used to do things are still right, like families. But the explosion of the media complicated things like Freud and Marx and Darwin have had a profound effect on what we think is intellectually right, intellectually respectable. Consider the debate on global warming, which is regarded by most liberal people as totally settled, but also the debate about evolution, which they regard as also settled. But they're not prepared to look at the evidence in at least one case.
Let's talk for a moment about and you mentioned it earlier, the terrorism we're seeing all over the globe.
Yes,
you've
sir.
got ISIS, Boko Haram, you've got Hindu extremists. It's exploding. It seems the posture of the Catholic Church now is we need to reach out in love, and that somehow we will be able to bridge the gap. This has not always been the way the Church has regarded such attacks. What should be the posture? Does it demand a more robust version of Christianity that flies its colors with a bit more vigor than we're currently seeing?
It does require a more robust form of Christianity, at least in language, if not in action. But it's interesting, given my life and my jobs, the first response here has to be by other governments. I could fault the Pope, but I would fault the president first, and I would fault the civilized world, the leaders of all of these countries. Look at the passivity of the French here with these attacks. Look at the Belgians. This guy they finally arrested was walking around getting his hair cut and so on. Do they know the evil that's around us? What is it that ISIS has to do to prompt us to act? Boko Haram, you mentioned. They've now found a number of these girls. They're living in these camps with babies. They were impregnated by Boko Haram members, and they are being treated as exiles, as pariahs, because they were raped by Boko Haram. What is it that the civilized world needs to see before it decides to act? We can act on this.
Sure, and should.
So presidents first with generals, the Pope standing behind, the church standing behind with a very strong message of approval. I can't imagine some of our popes, certainly some of the popes in here would not stand for it. Of course, they commanded armies, and that was another problem.
That was a different,
another problem.
That took us down even different roads.
Yes.
I want to talk politics.
But Pope Leo standing there in Rome, with Attila the Hun.
That's true.
It's quite an event.
Yeah, that's an
church authority.
And you have many of those chronicled in the book.
I
want to talk about 2016. What do you think we are seeing here? You initially said you could not support a Trump presidency. Have you adapted that thought at all, given the trajectory of this race?
If he's the nominee, I suppose I will vote for him. It gets harder every day. I wrote the Book of Virtues. This is not every day,
This is not the first chapter.
This is not any chapter. It's hard. It gets harder. Nevertheless, I think he's in touch with some issues that are very, very important. You wrote something, and I called you about it, that I thought was remarkably good. He is challenging the political establishment.
Yes.
When you reviewed, I think it was the Florida vote, why did so many Catholics and people of faith vote for Trump? They were sending a message not just to the political establishment, but to the religious establishment. I will vote for him if he is the nominee. My worries are that we have, as a Republican, I will say this, we have destroyed our chances in 2016. Maybe we can still salvage, because I don't think he can win, given his disapproval ratings, and I think he's effectively destroyed the chances for anyone else to win.
You think Hillary Clinton will end up being the nominee, being the president?
I still think she's going to be indicted.
So Bernie Sanders could end up being president?
No. I think we're not that far gone, I don't think.
I'm just trying to eliminate the possibilities,
Bill.
Bill.
Pushing me. No, I say I think she'll be indicted because I know something about the law. I went to law school. I think she should be indicted. I think the evidence, what we know is enough, I think, to indict her. On the Bernie Sanders thing, I have been saying, Raymond, if I've been saying one thing and stood for one thing for 45 years, it's if we don't teach them, they won't know. So we don't teach them American history. We don't teach them the meaning of freedom. We don't teach them why capitalism is better than socialism, even though capitalism has problems. And as a result, in the last poll of millennials, more of them preferred socialism to capitalism. Any sense of history here? Any sense of what socialism does in Russia, the Soviet Union, and communist China? No sense at all, I think.
Wow. Bill Bennett, always enlightening.
Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
And the book is Tried by Fire, the story of Christianity's first 1,000 years. It's available in bookstores everywhere and online. And the Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls tour continues. I'll be in Houston, Texas at the Texas Library Association Conference on Thursday, April 21st. I'm speaking at 9 a.m. and I'm signing books at the Random House booth at 10 a.m. On Monday, the 25th of April, I'll be in New Orleans at the Mir Group dinner at the Rose Garden at 6:30 p.m. Information on all those events can be found on the website, RaymondArroyo.com. I also want to remind you, Robert Royal's book, A Deeper Vision, is still available. The Catholic Intellectual Tradition in the 20th Century. Go grab both Robert Royal and Bill Bennett's books, are worth reading.